All right, how's it going? My name's Matt Barr. You listen to episode 120 of the Looking Sideways Action Sports podcast. It's the show where I dig into the most interesting stories in skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing, and other related endeavours. Thanks for tuning into this one. Hope you enjoy it. I'm back with my first skateboarding guest for a while. I mean, it's got to be 4 months, I think, before this. It was Bryce. So anyway, here we are, the great Mike Manzoori, much loved skater from the UK, who's quietly had one of the most creatively influential careers in British skateboarding. As such, he's got a brilliant perspective on the whole thing, and we covered it all during this conversation. Now, I've been wanting to chat to Mike for years. We almost got off the ground during my California trip last year, but we ended up missing each other by a couple of days. But we kept chatting, and when lockdown kicked in, and it became apparent that I was about to enter this brave new Zoom era of conversations, Mike was top of the list. So here we are. Now, I'm going to leave it there for the intro because it's a nice long one, this, and we do cover a lot of ground. But I'll be back at the end for the usual housekeeping corner. In the meantime, here's me and Mike Manzoori, auteur. Enjoy.
Yeah, I've been listening to some of them. The episodes are great. You know, I love what you guys are doing.
Thanks.
So
Which ones did you check out?
Yeah, stoked to be a part of it. I was listening to just the other day, what's his name? Sam Maguire is a good friend of mine. I was kind of listening to the ones of the people that I knew more, just because I find that more interesting, you know. And TLB one was kind of one of my favorite ones because obviously my era and everything like that, you know.
Well, I think I mentioned that when I put a shout out for questions. There's quite, you know, there's obviously a big strain of early 90s skate nostalgia. You know, we're all getting old.
Yeah, and everyone's got time on their hands right now to dig it up and put it out there again. So, yeah, I've been this last month has
definitely. So there's a lot of people like asking him about Rad and, you know, asking him about all those years and all that. So, yeah. But yeah, just a general catch up, really, you know. Just find out, you know, it's really, I think people really, obviously your transition from skateboarder to filmer and how that's gone. I think people always find that really interesting, especially because I was reading that thing. Did you do that with Ben, that Slam City interview a couple of years ago, maybe about sound and vision? And it was really, and I think I watched your Berwick's thing as well, where you were talking about it. And I found it really interesting when you were chatting about the fact that the first filming that you did essentially came about the fact that you were at college and you had access to like those old school editing machines, and you know you could borrow cameras and kind of, you know, literally started from that because you were all and that's what me and my mates did as well. You know, when we were that age, it was like, who's got a camera? You know, what can you get hold of?
Yeah, it was about accessibility, wasn't it? Like at that point, there was I mean, obviously going to college and having an edit suite at your disposal was a huge leap for me. But then just, you know, around that time was when people started actually having a camcorder in the house, whereas 5-10 years before that was really rare, you know, and they started to get cheaper and everyone started knowing a friend of a friend who at least had one you could borrow from, you know. So that's, yeah.
And there was always somebody who was like, you know, sort of bit more amped on it, ready to kind of work it out and learn it.
Yeah.
So that Sound and Vision, was that the first film that you made?
No, well, right before that, we did a sort of project for Matt Fowler's art, how do you say, his final exam, his final presentation. His degree was basically he was going to put together a skate brand, and this fictitious brand where Mark Channer, myself, and him were the team riders. The brand was called Jello, and so he produced, you know, all the graphics and all the ads and, you know, everything that you would produce for a brand. That was his final presentation, and I happened to have a camcorder at the time sent over from Santa Cruz because they wanted me to get footage of myself. So because I was sponsored by them at the time. So this camera was in my possession. He was doing that, and just one thing led to another. So we went out one weekend and we shot a video for that project, and it was called Bubblegum Weekend, I believe. I think, yeah, Bubblegum Weekend, and the Jello video, I guess you'd say, but it was for a brand that didn't exist. And yeah, so that was the first video I made with Mark Channer, and it was weird because it was for Matt's project, but we kind of just like helped. Yeah, we all skated together on it, but I do remember it was more me and Mark made the video because Mark was the one who actually had access to the media center because he was doing media studies. Me and Matt were doing fine art and graphics and stuff like that. So it was all this stuff sort of overlapped, and so we just kind of helped him out on his project in order just to make a skate video for fun. So that was the first one. And
so how old were you then?
that would have been 92 around then. So whatever age I would have been around then. Young, like 17, 18, something like that. But we were going to college out in Amersham, and I think Mark was starting to get flowed from New Deal UK, and we'd always be down at Harrow, and we showed the video in the skate shop, and I think Ray and Gary were just like, "Oh, sick, you guys made a video, make us some copies and we'll sell it." And so I think we might have sold maybe like 8 copies or something like that around the UK. I don't know. It's definitely a very underground skate video. I barely have a copy that I lost, and then I found one that I don't even know how to play right now because I don't have the PAL format VHS that's currently working. But that was the first video, and it got me sparked because that was the first time we had access to that editing suite that I mentioned. So,
and was that one of the classic 2 VHS kind of setup?
Yeah,
with it.
But it was fairly advanced in that you could program the in and out points and things like that. Like you didn't have to sync the cuts with your 2 fingers, like hitting the play and record at the same time. It was like you could line up the way you wanted things to start. It would pre-roll, play, and like do a nice smooth edit. And you could even do things like insert edits and stuff like that. But it was linear tape to tape. It wasn't like going on through a computer where you could do whatever you want as many times as you want. You had to sort of start at the beginning and work your way through it in chronological order.
Yeah,
for the most part. So it was a good fundamental learning.
So when did you start skateboarding?
Mid 80s, I'd say around 84, 85, somewhere around then. I was a little kid into BMXing, really into BMXing at the time, and spent all my money on bikes, trying to get it to look like a real bike. I just had this budget bike called a Piranha with these really heavy mag wheels, and I tried to decorate it like it was a Pro GT or something like that. And I remember going to a sports shop in Ealing Broadway that we heard had skateboards, and BMX Action Bike, the predecessor to Rad magazine, started to show a few skate photos in there.
Yeah, Tim sort of covered that, didn't he, in his interview, like that sort of transition
exactly.
when it kind of started to change. Wig actually mentioned that when that interview with Tim came out, that there was quite a few people in the BMX contingent who were a bit miffed about that. The fact that it kind of, that it sort of checked, that Tim was quite scathing a little bit about that. It was perceived, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting because I was just a tiny kid who had no clue about any of that side of stuff. I just saw people on the same half pipe doing similar stuff. Actually, to be honest, it really blew my mind because obviously back then you're just looking at a still photo, trying to make sense of it. And I'd seen some BMXing and videos and on TV and stuff, so you kind of got the idea of how they flew in the air on a half pipe. But the first skate photos I remember seeing was stuff like inverts on a vert ramp, and I just couldn't figure out what was going on. There's this guy upside down on one hand on the very edge of the ramp. Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. As a little kid, I'm 10 years old, so it kind of fascinated me. And so, long story short, I went into the sports shop that had some Veriflex boards, and we were checking them out, and I came out and my BMX had got stolen. And so I was like, I can't afford another bike. It took me years to patch that thing together. And so I bought a skateboard instead. It was only 40 quid as opposed to 140 for a bike or whatever a bike would cost. So patched together a board, and that was how it all started. So thanks to BMX.
Yeah, right. And it's quite a common thread, isn't it, that for that era, especially because you had those. I mean, everyone talks about this, but you had basically like E.T. and then Back to the Future, like these 2 huge kind of cultural things that really put them on the map, didn't they? That it's amazing how common that kind of little thread is when you talk to people of our generation about how they first got aware of it and got into it. Really.
Yeah. No, we were all. I mean, that's the other thing as well. There was, it wasn't a million channels as there are now, and we were all watching the same couple of TV shows or the same 5 major movies that came out every year. Now there's a plethora of choices. So everyone was kind of on the same page. So if you were that age group and you saw the same stuff, we all were just, wow, this is, I mean, it hit me really good anyway. So
Yeah, you do have the same cultural reference points, really, don't you? Be interesting to see how that is now for kids growing up.
I feel like it's more fragmented, there's just so much of everything, so people, I don't know, back then it was fairly easy to get your head around. I feel like now, maybe it's just showing my age, but I'm just like, how the hell do kids keep up? They got so much going on, it's dizzy, so.
Definitely. So when you first started getting serious about skateboarding, who were you skating with back then?
Well, I grew up in West London in Ealing, and so the first little crew was based around the skate shop Buddies. It was just this pretty rad skate shop for back then. We didn't really have too many in London. There was Slam City, M Zone, Surrey Skates, and Buddies as far as I was aware, and that was right on our doorstep. So that cultivated quite a good little scene. Some skaters that came out of there that people heard of maybe is stuff like Johnny Wilson. He was getting coverage at some point in Rad magazine, and a lot of skaters would come through there. With the shop, we had like ramps built from local skaters and stuff like that. That guy Jason K, JK, who is Jamiroquai, he was actually one of our little crew back then. He was a little bit older in the scene. I remember.
Really?
Yeah, I remember seeing him. He would be at the skate shop all the time with us, and I remember back then. You know how he's known for wearing those big fuzzy hats right now.
Yep.
I even remember back then distinctly him wearing a pretty similar looking hat as a young kid. He was probably like 16, 17. I was maybe 12, 13, and he was like busting dance moves in front of the full length mirror, for trying on clothes. And kind of like basically performing and literally telling us, like, you watch kids, one day I'm going to be famous. Like, he called it at that age. And we were just like, yeah, shut up, Jay, like, whatever, like, and yeah, next thing you know, he was pretty famous. He's done pretty good for himself.
Yeah, he did all right, yeah. I mean, he had the Gazelle swag, didn't he, going on? So, maybe that's where it came from, bit of that.
And he was a good skater.
Because he had... Because I can't believe I ended up talking about Jamiroquai. Like few mates of mine were in his first video because it was a snowboard.
Oh yeah,
it's a snowboard video, and mate of mine directed it. So it kind of makes sense because he definitely could skate a bit, couldn't he as well? Like there's some shots of him in some of the films, in the videos and stuff. So there you go.
That was the jump ramp era, and I remember he like back then he would be doing like 360s off the jump ramp when we were like, wow, that was the shit back then, like
yeah.
I don't know, he was good, like he was as good as it got as far as our scene. And there was another dude, John Shabaznev. Those guys did get a little bit of coverage in the magazines, but it wasn't that big of a deal. They just kind of they kind of got into doing other stuff really quickly. They didn't pursue it that far, but Johnny Wilson, he was kind of like he lived really close to me. He was my buddy, and we skate all the time together. And I don't know. My memory fades. It's only when I start seeing like old footage of magazines that it all starts coming back. I'm like, oh yeah, and this guy in that place. It's like it's been so long.
I was thinking the other day, like it's 30 years ago since. How old are you? I think we're kind of similar ages, right? Maybe you're a bit older.
40. Yeah, 47. I think this year. 74 I was born, so after 40 you start losing count.
You forget, don't you?
But,
I'm 44 this year, and I'm always like, am I 40? Yeah, 43, 44. But yeah, I was thinking today because I started skating in 1990, and the other day I was a bit like, yeah, wow, it's 30 years ago. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It's no wonder we can't really remember.
Well, there's a lot of details, but yeah, going back to the original question, sorry. So that was where I first started skating, and then the London scene. I was funny. My friend Andy just sent me some really old footage of Spitalfields.
Oh, really?
You see all the skate. Just like it was just a camera rolling, just shaky cam, like panning around, just capturing everything that was going on. And it really reminded me. It's funny. It came through just the other day. He sent it, and I was tripping on it because it was Curtis McCann, Johnny Wilson was there, Aaron Bleasdale, like all these like really amazing skaters that I was like lucky enough to be able to skate with back then. That I don't know, just seeing this old footage, they all like really stood out. It was kind of interesting to see because that was back when tricks were pretty flippy, and it was a lot of 99% bails, you know, everyone was just trying stuff, and like those guys, Winston, he was cruising around killing it, and like, yeah, it was just yeah, it was just a nice reminder of like, you know, just how good the skaters were back then, you know, and how sick it was to be around those kind of guys, you know, like it was a good scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's like romanticized quite a lot of that scene now, isn't it? Because it was a real particular era, like of
Yeah,
British skateboarding.
yeah, for sure.
Are you still in touch with Curtis? Because he's one of those kind of like, you know, whatever happened to stories, really,
Yeah,
isn't he?
I
A little
don't keep
bit.
in touch with him. I've seen him around a few times over the years when I'm back in London and stuff, and it's always amazing to see him. But yeah, he kind of split off and did his own thing a long time ago. So you know, I check in and try and, you know, through friends and check and make sure he's doing all right. But yeah, he's a legendary skater. I mean, he was so influential on me and everyone. I think back then he was leaps and bounds ahead of everyone. It's one of those things where, you know, you try and explain. I remember when I was young and people would be like talking about people from their era, and you're a little kid and you're like, I don't care, he's Tony Alva, who, whatever, you know, like that. You know, it doesn't resonate with you. But what I'm trying to convey about someone like Curtis is like, if you were there and you saw it, like the magic was so, there was so much magic there. It was unbelievable. Like the dude would just play skateboarding, you know, like tricks were just like fun to play around with, like new stuff that, you know, he or no one was doing sometimes, you know. And I remember he'd tell me, he'd actually, this really classic, I remember he'd say he would go to sleep, and before he went to bed he would think about tricks and play it through his mind to the point where he would like fall into a dream of it. And basically, like he said, he would like try and learn his trick, go through it mentally, so that when it came time to doing it the next day, it was just like he'd already gone through the motions, and he would just like that was his way of explaining how things weren't so hard for him. And I was just like, whew, maybe 14 at the time, you know, like he was a pretty deep thinker back then, you know, like he was, yeah. And yeah, he was phenomenal skater, like really nice guy too, really nice sweetheart guy, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that was a couple of, there's the guys that run that same old magazine. That was one of the questions. It was like, ask him how good Curtis was, because you know he is like that legendary figure that you say, and it's interesting to hear you say that, you know, even for you lot, he was that far ahead, really.
Oh yeah, I mean it was just like seeing Tom Penny for the first time, where you're just like, what the hell's going on here? Like this is so different and so like, you know, he was that, but before, you know, like I remember hearing stories even after 10 years after, when he'd gone to the States, and he was only there for a couple of months maybe, and he had such an impact, you know, he really stood out to everyone. It wasn't just like our hometown hero, it was like, you know, he resonated everywhere he went. And
Yeah.
I think that was part of the reason why I don't want to speak for him, but I did hear that was a lot of the reason why he got turned off by skateboarding, was after this trip to the States, he saw a lot of the ins and outs of the industry, and maybe thought it wasn't quite as much fun as he thought it was, and started to get into other stuff. He went to school and pursued other things, you know. So we lost a good skater in that one, but you know, he's a good dude still. So everyone's got to choose their own path, I guess. But
yeah, and what a legendary influence. Like even the fact that,
yeah,
again, you know, we're still sort of talking about it. But you were both on PAL, right? Because you were both in that Celebrity Tropical Fish film. Is that right?
that's right. Yeah, I got on PAL through Frank Messman, who was setting up the European team. He came to England for some contests, and you know, said he's going to send me some boards and stuff. And I was riding for M Zone at the time, the skate shop in London, which had Curtis, Jason Lunn, and Paul Wright and myself on the team. So it was a pretty sick team for back then. All those guys were like people I really looked up to, and I remember getting on PAL and just thinking, this is a bit weird. Like, you got to look at this kid Curtis. Like, if you think I'm all right, you got to focus on this guy, you know. So I told that guy Frank Messman, like, hey, there's this kid in England, you've got to send him boards. And so yeah, I think they got him on some trips, and he was in for a little while. So and then he went over to Underworld Element, I believe was the next step after that. But yeah, it was awesome getting him on PAL, because you know, you just wanted everyone to see the magic, you know. It was epic. Like he'd go to those Euro contests with us, and just, yeah, he only did a few, but I just remember people just being like, who the hell is this guy? Like, you know, his clothes, his style, like the way he skated, his attitude, everything was just like far superior to like everything else that was going on. It was pretty cool to see.
Have you still got some good footage from that then, of him?
I wasn't really filming that much back then.
Was that a bit before you really started?
Yeah. I didn't really have access to cameras up at that point.
Right.
No one I remember did that much. That's why when my friend showed me the footage just now, like the footage he sent me, Curtis wasn't even skating. He was just in the background, and that was exciting enough. You know,
right.
It was literally just like 50 people on the street course, and the camera's just chasing whoever was going on. And, you know, I was just trying to, like, in the blur of it all, catch a glimpse of who was who and what was going on. But, yeah.
Yeah,
I wish there was some Curtis footage. If there was some Curtis footage on there, I would have probably posted it by now and been like, oh my goodness, look at this gold.
That's why I asked, really, because you just don't see it, do you? Because, you know, on your sound and vision thing, which I watched the other day, like there's Penny stuff, there's Rowley, isn't there? Like when they're super young, you know, there's...
That's I would say that was probably right around the time that Curtis had already just gone under the radar and just started doing his own thing.
A few years later, maybe. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's perfectly in that point, isn't he? Where, you know, there's the magazine stuff, there's the kind of funky sequences that they used to run in Rad, like, you know, but yeah, it's just kind of, you know, the missing. Try to think of a music comparison. You know, it's like Stu Sutcliffe on bass, isn't it? It's like there's no footage.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect cocktail for legend and folklore, but it's all real. It's all true. I was there.
Yeah,
I promise. It's not hype, you know. Yeah.
So when you were on PAL, and then you start getting hooked up. You said you had a shop sponsorship, and then, you know, you mentioned Santa Cruz, you mentioned PAL. So things start to, you know, progress for you as a skateboarder at this point?
Yeah, the early 90s were great for me. I was, you know, skating as much as I possibly could, and you know, got to travel a lot, got on some amazing teams, got to skate with new people, and yeah, it was a pretty epic decade. Not that hasn't been since, but for skateboarding, and, you know, as a little kid getting to, you know, fulfill your dreams, it was absolutely mind-blowing. Yeah.
And are you, you know, because I've mentioned to you the Rad interview that you did, which I get what must be like 91, 92.
It was like a rare blue sky cover. I remember that. I just remember it being a lot of blue.
But I remember you were talking a lot about music. You know, you were talking a lot about...
They had all these, Tim did all these rad quotes from songs. Was it that one where he pulled all the quotes? Yeah.
You had, because that is like massively formative for, I think, because it's, like I say, a few people, it's definitely formative for me. That it's the first time I listened to Velvet Underground and Nico after reading that interview. And
man.
And like, you know, like I think it was interesting because, you know, it was definitely, for people that read it, a bit of a mind opener, you know, like, because that was the great thing about, well, just insofar as like the cultural reference points at the time, you know, were good for kids to hear, I think. So is music like a huge part of your upbringing? Is that, you know, was that something that was as important as the skateboarding?
Yeah, I never played music, but I love music, you know, just as much as anybody, I guess. But I think part of it was my parents had a pretty rad record collection going on, and so everywhere we went, there was always a soundtrack to everything. I remember my dad would have like 8-track cartridge recorder in the car, and so we'd always have music on, and it was always like pretty cool stuff, Rolling Stones, Beatles, and, you know, Santana, and, you know, just like, and you can see it in my videos. I've used Santana how many times in old English games.
It's still a big theme, isn't it? You know, obviously, like the recent stuff you've done, obviously you're taking as much care over the music, obviously, but even more so, you know, try to make it as creative as the filmmaker, maybe, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another opportunity to have fun with it. You know, there's so many layers to making videos, especially skate videos. You can inject a lot of weird stuff in there if you want, or, you know, have a lot of fun with music and stuff like that. So it's just another part of the creativity that's fun to enjoy. Yeah, definitely. I wish I could have played music over the years, but I know this is an audio recording, but if you could see these fingers, there's no way these buckled hands are going to do anything musical.
that middle finger's seen a bit of work, definitely.
Yeah, it should be straighter and not quite as fat in the middle. They look like twiglets inflated. But,
yeah. So yeah, like it was the whole package though, because it's a big theme for people I interview on this show, like, you know, when they discover these worlds when they're kids, you know, it's like, it's skateboarding, or it might be surfing, or it might be snowboarding. But, you know, there's this whole culture that comes with it. There's the music, there's the there's the kind of code, the cultural codes that come with it, which is so formative, aren't they?
Yeah, that's what makes skateboarding so interesting. It's not, I don't know how much, if you're into basketball or cricket or whatever sport it is, how much about your favorite athlete or whatever's personal life or what they're into, you just kind of know about their sport and their stats and things like that, I feel, for the most part. And whereas skateboarding, if you like to skater, you're intrigued by the graphics they use in their board. That told you something about them. The music they use in their video part. Like you said, when you read their interviews, they were, just opening up, peeling back the layers of the onion. Just you want to know more about this person, and it all built towards like who they were as a character, their attitude, and that was what was conveyed through their skateboarding. And I think that's why skateboarding is, it's something that can't be measured statistically. It's so expressive and subjective that it touches people on all these different levels. That it's culturally enriching, if I can say that rightly. My mouth's dry right now, but there's so much to chew on. There's so much juice to get into, and obviously some junk and gossip goes along with all that. But the fact that people are layered and have interesting stuff going on is, I think, part of what makes skateboarding cooler, I guess. I mean, my favorite skateboarders always seem to have a little bit more than just tricks happening. They're always kind of intriguing people as well. So,
well, there's like threads you can follow, isn't there? Especially when you start out, when you're young. Like you say, you can get into a skater, you can watch the video part, you can see the song, you can and you can start to sort of find your own path, can't you? And you can start to develop your own interests, which is obviously.
And going back to, I think what we mentioned earlier was that you didn't get an abundance of information. There was only a few videos. There was only a certain amount of magazines, and you were trying to make the most of what little you could. So you clung on to everything. As I think things were a little bit more dear to us, and you cherished a little bit more any information or any insight. And I wonder how it is now for younger kids, where they can turn into a complete what do you call it? Just a what's the word, where you troll. So you can just find out anything about someone these days. Like there's an abundance of information accessible. You could be a stalker. That's what I meant to say. You could end up being a stalker if you really want to find out about somebody, which is kind of a bit too far, obviously. But it's just a different landscape now where there's so much information. That's kind of interesting. But
Cairo Foster actually sent me a couple of questions, and
all right, hi Cairo.
He basically, it's kind of related to this. He kind of, well, I'll read the question.
Sure.
Is there the same opportunities for creativity in this age of constant content? Because it's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like how the sort of levels of content. I'm using inverted commas on content, but you know what I mean? Like, basically what we're saying is like these days it's proliferated so wildly, and we're talking about how on two levels really, like the influence of that, broadly, but then also personally. So it's in the same territory, isn't it? So what do you think about that? Because obviously you've kind of like followed, the arc of your creative career obviously goes from when we're talking about to now. So you were saying earlier like, I feel a bit old, but obviously you've had to kind of evolve with it, with the creative work that you do. So you must have a pretty unique perspective on that.
Well, I mean, I think it's healthier to look at it as more opportunity for cool creativity to come out of the world than worrying about. I mean, the negative is that you do get overwhelmed and swamped with junk. You have to sort of wade through all that to find the good stuff, but I'd prefer that and seeing more access and opportunity for people of any type, from any background, any place around the world, to be able to put stuff out there. You think when we were talking about earlier how decades ago it was a big turning point for me to have access to a camcorder. Now everybody's got a digital device in their pocket for the most part. Even some of the more poorest places around the world, someone could make an awesome video on a phone, blast it out there from some Wi-Fi network, and the world can have access to that, and go viral, and it could change their life. Like that never happened before. And I know it's like, one in a zillion at this point because there's so many people spewing out junk out there. But, if you're smart, you don't have to sit there and watch all the junk, and, you just figure out where you find your information. I just think it's better to look at the positivity of more opportunity for creativity, even though, you get a lot of sludge and the slides that come with it, So,
yeah.
I think that's more inspiring. I see some phenomenal stuff these days that just keep popping up on someone's feed or whatever, and it does feel a little bit disposable. Some things are just, they would have been like clever little ideas that some kid put on Instagram or YouTube that came and went, and they would have been probably an expensive advertising campaign for someone 30 years ago, where it was like a production and it was this thing that we remembered, whereas now it's just like pow, 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 they fire it off, so the temporary nature of it all is a little bit hard to handle. But then I think that's something to do with age and just sort of the what do you say, the pace that we live at. I think younger people have a different frequency they're operating on, so
yeah, there's a great Douglas Adams quote about that, which is like, anything that comes along when you're under 20 is like normal. Anything that comes along when you're between your 20s and 30s, it's like brilliant. Maybe I can get a job out of it. Anything that comes along after you're 30, it's like, this is shit, and the world's, and it is kind of true, isn't it? It's like, the way that you accept technology as you get older. It does get it's harder not to be the old fart going like, oh, like your mum when you're on Zoom going, oh, isn't this clever, sort of thing.
I mean, I'm blown away by everything, I'm so easily impressed. Like, I'm just like, every day that there's a hot water coming out of the shower, I'm like, holy shit, this is fantastic, like, so the fact that I'm surrounded by computer monitors, little LED lights, and 2 cameras just to make sure my audio is clear. I'm like, I'm so much technology. I feel like I'm in Darth Vader's bathroom, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, all this is amazing. Like the fact that you're in UK and we're just chatting away, and you look like you're in the room next door. I'm not taking a damn thing for granted.
No, when you put it like that, yeah. I mean, it is pretty incredible, isn't it?
Not to sound easily impressed, but it's all pretty cool, right?
It's worth remembering. It's definitely worth remembering. We've got this bloody thing in our hand with like every bit of information you could ever want. An incredible camera you could create with it.
If you're 10 years old again and someone told you that you could have a computer the size of your hand that could do what it could do, you'd be like, there's no way.
Even more, if you were 10 years old and someone said, look, here's this thing that's going to have every skate video that ever existed.
Yeah, just that.
You'd be like, fuck off. You're like, because obviously, what, you mean I'd have to go borrow one VHS and pass it around all my mates, you know what I mean?
Like, the phone is smaller than a VHS tape, and yet it has access to a universe of information and footage and all that stuff, and
it's got every song you ever wanted to hear and every section you ever wanted to see. Okay.
Yeah. So there's benefits,
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
All right, well let's try and keep the chronology sort of, roughly. So obviously we talked a little bit about your skate career, and then you did, from what I can tell, and from the outside, did the sort of classic, moved to the States, did that thing, and then at some point kept filming. Obviously, by the sounds of it, kept exploring filmmaking as well. At some point, made the transition. Did that, as in like from skateboarder to filmmaker, really? So how long did that take? That kind of that evolution, if you like.
Let's see. If I added it up, it was around 98 was when I started really coming out to the States more than staying in the UK. It was kind of like this incremental change where I'd come for trips that got longer and longer, and started working on visas that got longer and longer, and that was around the time that filming and skating were pretty parallel. I had jobs in both, which was really weird, but skateboarding didn't pay a damn thing back then as compared to some people do make some all right money now, but back then it was peanuts. You just really barely could scrape by, so the fact that I could get a little bit of extra money through filming and some editing was huge, so that was around 98, I think. All that started really kicking in. I came out and I take that back. 94, 95 was when I started like staying out here more than being in the UK. 98 was when I'd say video became more of my job. That's how it works. Yeah. That was when I started getting employed by Etnies, Soul Technology, as a video guy, I guess you'd say. But at the same time, I also still rode for them, was still skating professionally, slightly reluctantly because I was going through that long back back pain and foot problems, all these injuries that still linger with me now. And that was the transition period where I could see the people that were around me that I was filming were so much better than I was and was ever going to be. 'Cause I was just, skating was kind of deteriorating for me already at that point. So I'd kind of tried to opt out of being sponsored. It kind of got to the point where it's pretty embarrassing, like being on tours. I'd be like, I should be filming the demo, not in the demo,
Right.
So that was but it was a very comfortable transition because, like I said, I skated for Etnies and worked for Etnies video production. So it was like a smooth transition where, I know for some people when their skate careers come to a stop, it leaves them kind of hanging a little bit. So I was very thankful that was quite a natural process for me.
Yeah, right. So it was kind of an easy choice, really. You great when you saw that was happening, you were like, okay, cool, I can do that.
It wasn't even a conscious choice. It was just like everything just kind of like flowed that way, and it was fine with me and natural, and yeah. So yeah, I'm really not been very good at like making goals and planning and going for them. Things just happen to work out the right way or the way I like it, and I go with them. And yeah, it's been a absolutely amazing blessing, because if I tried to plan and go for it, I think it would have never happened. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. The stars just aligned, and I was just like, wow, sure, I'll take that opportunity every time, So I think maybe that was the one thing that I contributed, was the fact that I didn't say no to a lot of things and just went for it. It was difficult leaving my family and moving to the States and all that stuff. I still, I'm glad now that I can, chat with them on FaceTime and things like that very easily. But back then it was hard, I've got a big family. I miss them. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a big move, isn't it? Especially, and like you say, especially back then, because it was further away, than it is now. Both literally,
it felt further for sure. Yeah,
literally,
like even just a phone call was expensive.
Literally and metaphorically. Again, without sounding like two old farts going on about technology the whole time. You didn't have mobiles.
No.
It was phone cards. It was all that stuff. It was a bit more challenging to do that. So
Definitely.
I can understand why it felt like a wrench for sure. But it's a great time to be at Soltech, because a bit of a
it was huge.
A golden era of, but I'm guessing because you worked on some of the classics, right?
Yeah, I was really lucky that around the time I started working there, we were working on Manic Marty with Fred. That was the first big project that we did.
I mean, it's not a bad one to kick off with, really.
No, it was great. Yeah, but fantastic. And there was, well, I mean, before then I'd done the sheep video with Soul Technology and some other small projects, but this was like one of the first really full-on skate videos that not that other people had done, but like it was a big deal at the time. Like there was a full budget, there was a lot of travel, there was like it was really coordinated. A lot of that was thanks to Fred, because he actually went to film school and had like a little bit of structural background of how things worked, so that worked out great, because he actually started the project before I moved out there. I was like lagging on visas and all that kind of stuff, and so when I got out there, that was already underway, and so I just jumped in and helped him out on that. And after that they produced a bunch of pretty star-studded videos for the skateboarding goes. So I was really grateful to be a part of those for sure. The America projects, This is Skateboarding, and Stay Gold, and all that good stuff. So yeah.
Do you remember it as a time of basically constant learning?
Oh yeah, still. I mean, from then till now, it's just everything's just constantly learning. Yeah, but then especially because suddenly had access to all these computers. There's all this new software to figure out. Like cameras are evolving, lenses were new. Like right when I was filming for Manic Marty, was like getting used to the death lens and things like that. Like that was a kind of becoming a standard at the time, and just. There was a lot of change. Skateboarding was evolving fast, so there's a lot to keep up on, a lot of excitement going on. A lot of new epic skaters coming out of the woodwork. Arto Sari, I remember seeing him for the first time in some Euro contest and just being like, there's a few times when you see skaters over the years where the first time you have you kind of get that glory of how epic they are, and your hair stands up in your neck, and you're just like, oh, there's another one. This is dude. We're gonna know this dude for years to come. Like there's no way he's going to disappear. Like, you better not, you know,
Yeah.
because they just stand out so much, and you're like, oh, it's pretty exciting to be able to see that kind of stuff over the years, for sure.
Yeah, right. Well, I guess, yeah, when you put it that way, you've had a bit of a ringside seat, right? With some of
Totally, that's what the camera guy does, is just sit by
Yeah.
and watch the cool stuff go down. Rarely through your own eyes, unfortunately. So it was always
Yeah.
through a viewfinder, but I'll take it.
Well, yeah, on that front then, total geek question, but anything in particular? It's almost like an impossible question, but of all the people that you filmed, anything in particular stand out where you know, as a particularly legendary session, or something that, you've mentioned Arto, you've mentioned a couple of others, like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so thankful that there's so many I've lost count. Like, I literally, like, there's a wall of hard drives right here next to me. I've got like 60 hard drives, and if I just plucked in any one of them in any era and any project, there'd be a session or something where it would blow my mind that I was be a part of it. Whether it was something back with Heath Kirchart days, going out on some crazy 4 a.m. night mission with him, or some weird Tom Penny times. I don't know, just there's so many epic things I've lost count on filming. I mean, yeah, when people remind me, I'm kind of surprised that I was even there, because, like I said, it's kind of it doesn't feel real when you're like looking through a camera and then everything seems like it's on a screen. Like, it's hard to feel like you were even there sometimes, because you just live so much of it through the screened memory, rather than that when you're actually there. It was so brief and just fleeting that it doesn't quite sink in. What you remember more is the footage, unfortunately, which isn't quite the experience. I think the friends that are around high-fiving them around afterwards, they're probably the ones who remember all that stuff in a little bit more detail. But yeah, no, I've seen a lot of great. I mean, one that just popped to mind was, when speaking of Heath, was when he did that back 360 at Bob's Mega Ramp. That just everything about that situation was out of this world and unusual. Like, Heath, the last person you'd probably expect, or most people would probably expect if they didn't know him, would be on the Mega Ramp. But if with the backstory and everything, it somehow made perfect sense. And yeah, everything about that was just nuts. So yeah, there's definitely been some moments.
And you've been with Soltech and Etnies for a long time, which, I mean, I guess is quite rare, really, to stick with one company for that long.
Yeah, no, I worked for them for a little over, I think, around 25 years or so. I only recently just stopped working for them full time. I do freelance stuff for them here these days. Well, a few projects actually this year, so that's quite nice. And yeah, it is weird that I worked for one place for so long, but I think part of the reason why it was easy to do that was because it was one building, but they had several brands. So over the years, I would rotate different projects, different brands, and so it was almost like I worked for a bunch of different companies over the years. Like, things always evolved and felt fresh. There would be a different project with a new crew, and then it'd be, when it's America, Etnies, and so that kept it very fresh. And there was always something to learn. I just felt like it was a really, really beneficial experience throughout, and they were also very, very flexible in that any chance that I had other projects that could come up, that, as long as there weren't any kind of conflicts of interest, I wasn't doing like other shoe brands or things like that. But if any other projects came up over the years, as long as I had time to do it, which I kind of would sometimes bend over backwards to make the time to do it, but I got to do a lot of different stuff over the years. So it wasn't like I was freelance, but I got to have a pretty broad experience out of the whole thing. So it sounds weird when I look back and say I worked for one place for 25 years, but it really felt over the time that it was a lot of different projects and people. So that kept it fresh and exciting.
Because the brands are so distinct as well. So I guess after a while, you must have got to the point where you kind of, knew what idea worked for what brand, right?
Well, that was what was cool, was whatever idea you came up with, you went, that's this cool idea. Which one should we go for? Who does it fit best? So that was really, really nice. It was almost like working for an agency as opposed to one brand, because you could kind of divvy things up. They had 32 snowboard boots out of there too, which is, obviously a whole different vibe to the skate brands. And then, they had Altamont clothing through there. And so there was all these different projects that, you could kind of get involved in. But I tended to sort of shift from sort of brand to brand and work on sort of like the major projects. There was only certain periods where I was like juggling between brands. And it was also great in that they gave us the opportunity to hire some really good people. So I got to work with, like I said, Fred in the beginning. I got John Miner in there right after I started working in there, and he's kind of started to focus more on the America stuff. And this guy, Dustin Aaron, who people don't know so much of, but he was an epic dude to work with over the years there. And just, we'd collaborate on various people for outside projects. And so, yeah, it was just generally like a really invigorating experience, I guess you'd say. So I'm thankful for everything the opportunities they gave me. And those guys got me my green cards and visas and finally my citizenship. So there's that. So yeah, it's been I got lots to thank Pierre for. Yeah, just that in itself, I can't believe, it took decades to get through all that. But I've got nothing but thanks for those guys. It's been a great ride. So
yeah, seems like you and John have always, worked really well together. What do you put that down to?
Yeah, I mean, John was guy I met in '94, I think, when I first was doing the ATM click thing, and he was really just had the same sort of thing going on as me. We were really into skating and filming, and he's really good at filming too. He's a great editor as well, but he was quite an inspiring guy to be around because you'd see someone doing sick stuff, you want to try and get some of that. And so it was and we just kind of shared a lot of taste in music, and had good crews around us. Like I lived in Santa Rosa, or when we did the ATM thing, a lot of the guys were based in Santa Rosa, and I moved there, and we had this whole like small town amazing skate scene where for some reason half the skaters was really good sponsored skaters that so as filmers you always had amazing talent to film. It was quite a unique situation. And so I'm glad that over the years that John got to kind of tag along and jump in on projects and then take over pretty much the whole America thing for a good few years now, and he's just gone from strength to strength and killed it. Like it's really awesome to see that kind of stuff, because he was great back in the day, and so it's just awesome to see it get better.
So you've been in the States, like you said, for over 20 years. Has it been? Are you used to it now? If that's not a strange question, like living there, was it a difficult transition? Because obviously it sounds like the word difficult is like getting the green card and all this sort of stuff. Like,
there's a lot of hoops to jump through. That side's kind of difficult, especially because I was born in Iran, so that's only gotten worse over the years with all this.
You were born in Iran.
Yeah, I was born in Tehran, and I moved to London when I was 3 or 4, and so right before my 4th birthday. And so that always comes up as a big red flag on all my US citizen applications, visa applications and stuff like that.
I went to Iran in 2005, and then I went to the States the year later, and they nearly didn't let me in.
They don't
just because of a stamp. And they were like, what? I got to Boston, got to the airport. They were like, why have you got an Iran stamp in your passport? And I was really naive because I went snowboarding there, and I was like, well, I went snowboarding there, and they were like, fuck off, mate. and then it basically got hauled out, and I was like, wow, they're not going to let me in here, like over this. And like you say, I guess if you're actually born there, that's going to be more difficult, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's it's not just a stamp; it says it in your passport, born in Tehran. So which I'm very proud of, but they definitely look at it as a red flag. So I'm very not surprised that happened to you. And whatever, it's fine. Moving out here that wasn't the hardest thing. The visa thing is just you got to be ultra patient. The hardest thing was missing family and friends and that kind of stuff. But I did get to travel back and forth quite frequently in the first 10 years at least. I was always back in Europe like 3 times a year, so that obviously eased the blow of you didn't miss everyone quite as much, and just the fact that I'm a young kid just getting to live my dreams and get to skate all this cool stuff and meet all these cool people, and it was just one epic experience after another. So you just sort of went with the momentum of it, I think. You didn't sort of have time to stop and worry about it. So
Yeah. And what about some of the recent projects that you've been doing? Like, they've seemed to have been getting, really involved. Like, like what I mentioned earlier, the soundtrack stuff you did for album, and actually having that hand in hand with the filming. Is that kind of create, like, very full on creative challenge, something that you seek out with these projects?
do you mean do I like to bite off more than I can chew?
Yeah, if you like.
Do I like to get into areas I have no business being? Yeah, I love it. No, well, I think it's like I was saying before, how what's interesting about video production is how many layers of creativity you can bring into it, especially through skateboarding stuff. And yeah, I just it's just more fun to have with it, I guess you'd say. Part of it was also a little bit through not necessity, but if anyone knows anything about video production these days, or just putting out any kind of stuff like that to the public, then they'll know that music licensing is an absolute nightmare for the most part. To get tracks that you really want typically is way too expensive, or you can only license it for certain regions. There's so many complications to it. It's we don't want to spend all the time talking about that, but just know that that was a huge reason. In my philosophy for the album project was, I would rather the budget that we did have not go to some publisher who doesn't have any soul for music, doesn't care about the project, doesn't care about any of this stuff. They're just there to milk the money. Because I've had times where we've had the artist, the label, all back in the budget and the project, and then you've got a publisher who just wants a bunch of money, and they don't care. And even though the artist is emailing on our behalf, like, no, I'm down for the project, I think it's cool, I'm fine with the budget, So I just rather work with people who are just as excited to be in the video as we are to have them in the video. So first I was going to work with bands that were, skaters bands already, and then because a good friend of mine, Noel Paris, has this studio that we have access to, we basically sort of evolved the idea into, like, well, how about we sort of make it this full circle of giving back to skateboarding and getting musicians who were skaters, or maybe some of them were famous skaters, or some of them not even so famous skaters, but just skateboarders who have gone on to do good things in music, have them collaborate and try and come up with something unique and do the whole scoring to the footage and that kind of thing. So we kind of got carried away with it, and I think probably like halfway through the process of making the tracks, we were just like, damn, this is really, really involved and time consuming. But what was cool was everybody who did get involved really did it from the heart. And there was, like I said, there was some budget for them, but once you spread it thin and paying everybody a little bit to come and play just a guitar on a track or something, it doesn't go that far. They're definitely doing it for the love. But musical legends to me, like Mike Watt, who really was understood why it was important to care about the project. He gets skating as a fan base for his music and knows how important it is to give back to it, and just stuff like that. It was it's just made the project that much more enriching to be a part of. And but we definitely went out on a limb. I don't know if everyone liked the sound. I'll just have to add that to the end. I know it wasn't everyone's cup of tea. But there's definitely, but then you can't please everyone, can you? I was just definitely trying to do something different and push some creativity, but whether it works
exactly.
Or not, that's a whole nother subject.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, ultimately, who cares? That's the way you got to look at it, isn't it? Because what I mean is, who cares whether you can't go into it. And this stands for any kind of creative project, isn't it? Worrying about the potential, what the potential audience might or might not think of it. You have to just do what you want to do and do it honestly, and then people usually respect that, I think, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the people that were involved in it all seemed to like it, so that was why I based it off of. Everyone who was doing it was equally hyped on it. It wasn't just me going on a tangent and coming up with some tunes on GarageBand. There was a collaborative effort, and Yeah, it's one of those things where you know you're not going to please everyone, so you just kind of have to trust your gut and go with something that you feel works. And hey, if you fail some things, you tried. Like what are you going to do?
Did you brief them then, the musicians? Like, did you, or was it like, here's the footage, do what you want?
No, I was in the studio pretty much the entire time, and we would have rough cuts of their part, and we would have it playing on a monitor, and sometimes we'd have more than one musician and they'd kind of play as a jam, but typically it would be musicians layering upon layering. And Noel, the guy whose studio it was, he's a fantastic drummer, and we had some sort of core musicians who would be there more frequently, and then guest musicians would come in and work on tracks. So certain people worked on pretty much the entire soundtrack except for a couple of songs, and then other people came in on just 2 or 3 songs here and there. And so I tried to let them kind of just feel it out and give me what they would give me, but I definitely did direct a lot just to kind of let them know why things were a certain way. Quite often I would edit the parts to a track that kind of, or even multiple tracks that kind of set the tone and the pace for it, so it had a certain rhythm and timing to it. It wasn't just a bunch of footage just thrown in there.
Right.
So we'd literally start with like, this is the tempo, this is a beat, and then layer from that, and then go back and revise the drums. So it was really weird way of making music, I think, even for them. Like, a lot of them had a little hard time getting their heads around it. Some people worked fantastically with that process, but other people, it was definitely a little bit different for them.
Sure.
So it might not have brought the best out of them, unfortunately, but it was, just kind of how we had to do it at the time. So
Yeah, but those restrictions probably what made it what it is as well. It's another part of it, isn't it? Like how
a little bit, yeah.
How those things, this unique set of circumstances, like what they lead to.
Yeah, and it was nice to get some special people in there for not just things that meant stuff to us. Like on Trevor McClung's part, his dad's a really good guitarist, and very reluctantly, his dad didn't want to do it, but we got him to like play one of the acoustic tracks on his part. And
oh, right,
it was just like things like that where like not everyone's gonna know all this stuff, but we really put there was a lot of like thought went into every second of it, so not sure how much of that translates. I know everyone just wants to hear a banging tune, but and maybe we tried to get too highbrow with it on some of it, but it is what it is. We did grab a couple of tracks from one band. Zulux is a friend of mine in LA that good skaters who kill it and make amazing music. So one of their tracks that was for Doogie's part, and then Nick Garcia had a track that Atiba made with his band. So there's a couple of tracks that existed already, and Jamie Tancowney for his part, those guys that was one track I had nothing to do with. I just came in after they just jammed and recorded this, and they were like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Great, polish it up, and that's a part, So it wasn't all me leaning over their shoulder, but a lot of it was, and so
yeah. Well, we should talk about the videos as well, because you did a fucking Dinosaur Jr. video, which is epic. I mean, again, you like Mike Watt, Jay Mascis, sort of ticking them off, ticking off the legends.
Well, that's actually how I got to know Mike, was through that Dinosaur Jr. video.
Right.
They were on tour. The way that video was shot was we jumped in on a tour and were there from I think like Monday to Friday while they're going around like northern Florida, and the tour was specifically going to really small venues in small towns. That was I know Dinosaur Jr. doesn't do giant arenas, but they were going to tiny like bars and like really small venues. It was kind of a cool tour. And Mike Watt and Minutemen were along with it for the ride. They were touring as well. And we actually had Mike cameo for a couple of shots in like this behind this, backstage scene in the video. He's like just sitting there chilling while things are going on. And then also when there's a shot where Jay Mascis does the Daffy Duck, little skate trick, I think, with a truck sitting there, and Mike Watt's just chilling there. So he was just like a cameo friend and friend of the band. And so it was nice that when having that as a reference point to when I got introduced to him through the musicians that were working on the soundtrack, it was like, oh, you again, I remember you. So it was made it very easy to get him involved. And yeah, like I said, he totally understands the impact of his music on skating and vice versa, and he was so down for it. He gets it completely, which was awesome. So
Yeah, that's rad. So what creative ambitions have you got left with all this? I mean, you've kind of said like, I just sort of follow the opportunities and see where it leads. But, as you've just outlined with the process you described about album, like there's a lot of forethought and love and detail going into this stuff. So do you have any, ambitions that you've yet to fulfill? I don't even just mean with skateboarding really, anything that any projects that you can tick off during lockdown?
I mean, to tick off during lockdown. Lockdown is just all about tidying my house. My office is a mess.
Sorting them hard drives out.
At some point that too, but just more like, my house needs a definite tidy up. I've been so focused on work for decades now that house projects get started but never get finished. So there's a lot of that to do right now. But as far as creative projects and video projects, I mean, the last few months right before lockdown were fantastic in that I, having started to do freelance for more of a variety of clients, I guess you'd say, and different styles of projects, I've been just really enjoying sort of a rebirth of learning, I guess you'd say. Like when you do the same thing for a long time, it's very easy to kind of get stuck in a groove and lean to what you know. Just getting to work with other creative people has been like just a really refreshing, exciting change for me. So I'm hoping this whole lockdown thing doesn't carry on too much longer, and hopefully this lockdown doesn't last too much longer, because I'm definitely keen to get out there and just kind of just doing different projects. I'm not snobby. I try not to be snobby, at least. I'm not like, oh, I want to own every project, because in skateboarding you tend to be sort of a one-man or two-man show, and like we were just describing with album, you're involved in so many levels of the project in detail and micromanaging stuff that I probably should have pulled back a little bit from. But it was it's great to learn from. But now when you're working freelance, you tend to be sort of like one cog in a machine, for the most part, outside of skateboarding anyway. And I'm really enjoying that aspect. It's quite different to have a lot of experts in their own field around to learn from, like whether it's lighting guys or audio guys or just other cameramen or just different editors, and just seeing how people do things up close, and just being able to learn from that and hopefully grow from that, and just see where that takes me, I guess you'd say. So I think at this point in my life it's time to just try and be as flexible and open to opportunity as possible, because I don't know, skateboarding has been really good to me for decades, and again, like I said, it's still supporting me in a lot of ways, but I never expected it from the beginning, middle, or throughout, and I'm still blown away that I'm even talking to you about skateboarding now, like that anyone cares what I have to say about it. So the fact that I'm thankful to have got this much of a ride has been mind-blowing. I always say I'm one day going to wake up and have to get a real job, so I'm kind of trying to be prepared for that, but also try and make it as creative and fun as possible, because skating's been this amazing base for my life. Everything's been based around it so far, and I don't think that's going to go away, but it's also really fun to bring other things, and if I can contribute that to skating, that's cool, or just learn from it, that's cool in itself. So
yeah, I think you might have got away with the proper job thing. I think you're safe. I think at this point you probably
it doesn't feel like a proper job. I mean, it's
you know what I mean though, like, because I'm the same. I'm like, whenever anyone asks me what I do, I always say I piss around for a living, but
yeah, that's the attitude that keeps it from feeling like a proper job, I guess.
Yeah, I reckon you got away with it. Hey man, that was amazing. Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it. So there you go. That was me and Mike Manzoori. I think I embarrassed him a bit with the stuff about how formative his rad interview was early on. But, I don't really care, because it was. And if there's one thing I reserve the right to do in these interviews, it's give credit to the people who've had such an influence over the years. And that interview was massive for me and a lot of other people. And I actually think it's really sweet when the people involved, you know, like Tim Leighton Boyce and Mike in this case, are actually amazed at the reach it has. And it just goes to show how important this stuff is, no matter what you're making and no matter who you think's listening or reading or whatever, because people are, and it means a lot. And, you know, that's why the media that we're all engaged in is so important. So that's why I want to back it. That's why I want to big it up. So that's why I did. So I hope it didn't embarrass you too much, Mike. But, you know, I think the fact that he reacted like that just goes to show what a modest, positive, generous, and generally lovely character he is. I mean, he even sent me an email afterwards apologizing for treating it too much like a normal interview rather than a podcast conversation, which I've got to say is a first in the 120 odd interviews I've conducted for this show. I'm going to put Mike at one end of the scale and Alex Nost at the other end of the scale when it comes to the graciousness displayed therein. So thanks for doing it, Mike. And thanks so much for the kind words about the episodes you've listened to as well. I was genuinely tickled by that. Now, I should also say, I'm very, very lucky in doing this podcast because I get a lot of support from all corners. Now, obviously, there's the listeners who get in touch to support the show, which I hugely appreciate. But then I'm also lucky to get really selfless, amazing support from people in the industry, you know, friends old and new, people I don't really know as well. You know, take this episode, Don Brown, who I do know, but, you know, he did the intros, Don, with me and Mike, which was a massive help. And then putting it together, I've been so lucky to have the guys at Read and Destroy and legendary photographer Wig Warland sort me out with pictures for this episode, which you can see over at my We Look Sideways Instagram. And you can also see it over at www.wearelookingsideways.com on the show notes. Wig in particular, I need to thank because he's a busy man and he went out of his way to help me here. Don't worry. I did ask him to come on the show again. Got to be about the 10th time now. And we agreed that it'll happen at some point soon. I mean, at the minute, he's really busy working on the amazing MK Skate project, which I very much recommend you go and check out over at mkskate.org. So what else is going on? Well, I've been busy, basically. One of my friends once said to me, you'd make a to-do list in a cave, you. And they appear to be right. But I am enjoying it. It means I've been ticking off a lot of things on the to-do list, including, drum roll, next week's episode, which is my long-awaited interview with the great Terry Harkinson, long-awaited not least by me. Yet we finally got it done, even if it did turn into an absolute mission involving multiple Zoom and WhatsApp calls, lost files, and loads of other tedious podcast-related misadventures. But we got there in the end, and I'm very happy with it. It's great catching up with Terry. And this is the important bit. I'm going to release the audio version on my YouTube channel first. Yeah, so I've been busy sorting out the YouTube channel over the last few weeks. I've mentioned it a few times. I'm going to put the Terry episode live on YouTube first in a shameless bid to drive a few subscriptions. I'm going to be honest about that. And then after that, I don't know how long I'll leave it up there first. It'll be released on all the usual audio channels as normal. You know, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and whatever those little weird ones that some people seem to like using. Yeah, smart, eh? So if you want more info on the YouTube channel, I'm going to be honest, at the minute it's got the audio episodes on there, and I'm also putting the Type 2 live shows that I've been doing on Instagram on there. You need to head, if you want to find out more, to my We Look Sideways account at Instagram, because that's where I'm going to be putting the links and all that. Fiendish stuff, eh? Proper traffic driving stuff, this. Anyway, that's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed this episode with Mike. As usual, if you did, please consider sharing it, leaving me a review, buying some merch to support the show, signing up to the newsletter, all that stuff. You can do all of that over at my website, www.wearelookingsideways.com. And I'll be back next week with Terry Harkinson. Nice one.